want to touch on a few stats today. I mean, I know Kevin Austin Jr. Probably had his best game in a Notre Dame uniform, at least statistically speaking. Went 6 for 139 and a touchdown. I think that was his most yards. He had a really nice catch down the sideline. I forget who was that. Buckner who threw that ball. There? No, it was Cone. No, it was Cone. Yeah, because Buckner only had like a 12-yard completion or something like that. But he had a really nice like shoestring almost catch, or caught it with his fingertips, if you want to say, and that led to a touchdown. Had another one that was almost a touchdown from Buckner, which was that 12-yarder. And then, of course, he had the touchdown as well later on in the game. So he had a really nice game. Can't speak highly enough about Kyron Williams. The guy just brings it every week. I think I'll forever have that one. I think it was against North Carolina after the 91-yard run, after he had injured his knee and everybody thought he was done for the year. And Brian Kelly comes and talks to him, and he goes, "Are you good?" And he goes, "Coach, I'm always good," or whatever he says. And it was, I think I'll forever have that highlight in my head when it comes to him. And it's just really the way he plays the game, and he epitomizes what you want to see in almost every guy that steps on a football field for your favorite football team. And of course, today he goes out and, averages 5.6 yards a carry, continuing to, raise his stock in the NFL draft, but also, after a slow start to the season, mostly because of the offensive line, at least statistically speaking, he's now over 5 yards a carry on the year. I think he has like 12 or 13 touchdowns on the season as well. And, if Notre Dame was undefeated, we might be talking about him as a Heisman candidate with no one really running away from it. I think he's certainly pretty much on par with Kenneth Walker this year overall, if you add his receiving statistics in there. So kudos to him. And then Logan Diggs looks like another, the next in line to just be a really, really good running back for Notre Dame. His touchdown run specifically was tremendous. Like I said, he looks like maybe the next really, really great Notre Dame running back. So just highlighting a few guys on the offensive side of the ball for those reasons.
Yeah. How about Golden Tate talking about Kyron Williams? I don't know if you caught this comment or not. He said, he's like, this might be the best number 23 that Notre Dame's ever seen.
We're talking about that.
Right. I sort of was, it took me a second. I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, Golden Tate. You haven't seen Golden Tate in a 23 jersey for a long time. It's like, So I wonder how many Notre Dame fans, I believe that was during halftime is when that comment was made. So I wonder how many Notre Dame fans actually caught that. But yeah, high praise for sure. Yeah. Kyron Williams. I mean, he's going to be one of my best, or one of my, most loved Notre Dame players. When I'm sitting talking about Notre Dame in 20 years, I'm going to be talking about Kyron Williams, I'm pretty sure.
And ironically enough, or weirdly enough, I would say, even though Golden Tate was a receiver, he was sort of recruited as a running back / receiver early on. I don't know if you knew that, like in the Charlie Weiss era, but people didn't know what he would exactly play. And, he did do some of the reverse game and stuff like that during his time at Notre Dame, but they kind of look very similar. I mean, they're sort of built similarly, and they I don't know if Golden Tate had the dog mentality in him that Kyron does, but he certainly had that dog mentality, and I think he carried that into the NFL maybe more than he did when he was at Notre Dame. Probably mostly because he was just blowing by people when he was at Notre Dame, and he would catch those Jimmy Clausen 50-yard touchdowns where no one was even near him. And Kyron Williams has to work for his a little bit more. So you see more stiff arms and broken tackles and stuff like that, partly because of the position he plays. But he really does. I mean, I've never really thought about that comparison until you just brought it up. And obviously, I don't think that's what he was meaning with this comparison in general either. But like I said, now you kind of watch him on the field, and there's some Golden Tate to Williams's game for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and they're both just such well-rounded players that just do whatever, Notre Dame asked of them to do, whether it was, for Golden Tate, catch one deep, catch one over the middle, catch a screen pass, take it, get a reverse. I mean, for Kyron Williams, it's, pass block, probably not run block so much, but catch a pass and shake a couple dudes. Get all of these yards after first contact, all of that stuff. I mean, they're both those kind of Swiss Army knife type of players, I guess, and that's kind of, another, I guess, layer to the comparison.
I would argue he does run block just for himself with his stiff arms and broken tackles and stuff. It's kind of like run blocking for himself, weird way of putting it. But I want to get, like I said, I do appreciate the comments from you guys. I want to get to a few that hopefully you guys are still listening. That put these out earlier. The first one was Ohio State's offensive effort today won't be enough versus Purdue. And I think that brings up an interesting point. I mean, it's now the second week in a row that Ohio State's looked kind of iffy against a mediocre football team. I know Penn State's, well regarded, but they do have 3 losses now. And, today against Nebraska, who I think is probably a little bit better than their record shows because they've been competitive in a lot of their football games this year. Had Ohio State on the ropes in the fourth quarter and had a chance to win that football game if they didn't, I think did more damage to themselves overall. But, it's interesting. If Ohio State would have lost today, Notre Dame probably would have jumped them with 1 loss versus 2. But you got to start thinking is, maybe Notre Dame deserves to be kind of in that Michigan to Ohio State territory as a football team now that they're kind of playing their best ball. I know in years past when Ohio State, or a couple of years ago, I know when Michigan lost to Notre Dame to begin the season, at the end of the year, there was a lot of talk that Michigan was the better football team because of the way they were playing. And Notre Dame was maybe scraping by a few teams or didn't have the resume maybe that Michigan had. But then, of course, Michigan loses to Ohio State, and then it was neither here or there when it came down to that. But almost in the reverse, you can almost argue that Notre Dame has looked like the better football team over the last several weeks comparatively to some of these teams that are ahead of them. Obviously today with Michigan State and Cincinnati losing, Notre Dame's going to jump them, of course, I would assume. Maybe not Michigan State, but Michigan State did lose to kind of like, again, another, good but mediocre team in general in Purdue, who's lost to some good teams, but also beat some good teams. And then Wake Forest, obviously, with only being 1 spot ahead of Notre Dame, kind of disrespected already with their record as it was. I think Notre Dame jumps them fairly easily. But it's an interesting conversation, I think, with Ohio State and maybe not Oklahoma until they lose. But I'm starting to get into this. I mean, I think Notre Dame goes 11-1 to end the season, which is going to put them in not the driver's seat to make the college football playoff. I would not bet on them making the college football playoff because I still think a lot of things have to go their way for that to happen. But it's things are starting to happen where it feels like there might be this like sliver of possibility that they could somehow sneak in.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic because, I was thinking about this too. It seems like every other year, I can think of a couple years at least where Notre Dame was sitting there with like a 1 loss, and you're kind of thinking about the scenarios, and you're thinking like, man, I hope Notre Dame, like this happens and this happens and this happens, and Notre Dame gets in. This year they looked bad, and then they lost to Cincinnati, and you start thinking like, oh, Notre Dame's, you don't even think that the college football playoff is a possibility or something you want. But now here we are again, now it's early November, and it's looking like there are a couple things. I mean, there would need to be a little bit of chaos for it to happen, but chaos always seems to happen, it feels like. So I don't know. It will be interesting to see, I think I sort of disagree with you that I think the Michigan State's still going to stay ahead of Notre Dame.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Because it doesn't make a ton of sense. Notre Dame beat Purdue, and Notre Dame's 1 loss is against another team that's in the top 10. And Michigan State can't say the same. They lost to Purdue, and their loss obviously came against someone that's not in the top 10. So, but the precedence is, until, and I know this wasn't a college football playoff ranking, but people had Iowa ranked ahead of Notre Dame after losing to Purdue. So I don't know. We'll sort of see. Like I say, I know the college football playoff's a different thing than the AP poll, but most of the time, it seems to mirror it pretty closely, with obvious exceptions, I guess. I don't know. And Cincinnati continues, we talked about the word perplexed earlier. They perplex me. I don't know if you caught any of their game, but man, after beating Notre Dame, they just haven't looked good. And I wonder how badly that hurts Notre Dame, because since Cincinnati hasn't looked real great and only got, even though they're undefeated, to the 6th seed, how badly that loss looks on Notre Dame, because Cincinnati is not, they're on the outside looking in right now. So I don't know. that's Cincinnati should have lost today. Let's just put it that way. I mean, I caught bits and pieces of that game in between the Notre Dame game and stuff, but they should have lost to Tulsa. So I don't know.
Themselves, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be interesting as we speak right now. You know, I've got LSU Alabama, which usually is like a big game. Obviously doesn't have the same build up this year for, you know, since LSU is not very, very good, but you know, they're almost to the end of the first quarter and LSU looks pretty good against Alabama and is up a touchdown. And Alabama just looks bad right now. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, as chaos unfolds over the last 2-3 weeks of this college football playoff, or I'm sorry, the season, how the college football playoff ends up shaking itself out. I got to be honest, I would not be looking forward to a game against Georgia in the college football playoff if that's what was going on. But you know, at the end of the day, I don't know. I love the chaos. You might as well, if you're gonna play a game in early January, maybe you might as well be against Georgia and give yourself a chance to win a national. I mean, you're not going to turn down a chance, I guess, is the best way that I can put it.